I want you to do something for me right now. Open your phone,
Okay.
go to Spotify, Apple Music, whatever you use, and scroll down to those playlists the algorithm makes for you. You know, the ones deep focus, sleep, brain food.
Oh, yeah. I'm guessing I'll see a lot of like generic titles, Rain on Roof, binaural beats for study, maybe some artist names that sound a bit like computer passwords.
Exactly. We treat this stuff like acoustic wallpaper. It's functional. It's just there. But today, I want to shatter that illusion because that background noise, that lo-fi beat to study to, it is actually the result of a 50-year technological war.
That is a very dramatic way to put it, but, you were absolutely right.
We are digging into this fascinating breakdown by a writer who goes by Emister, published back in September 2025. It's called History of Post-Rock Ambient and Evolution of Equipment.
Right.
And the core argument here is it's totally mind-bending. It argues the history of this music isn't really about songwriting, it's about engineering.
Exactly. It's all about the tools. It's about how we went from, physically cutting magnetic tape with razor blades in a dark room in 1975 to using artificial intelligence to basically hallucinate infinite music today.
So that's our mission. We're going to trace the evolution of sound as an environment. We aren't just listing bands you should know. We're going to look at the gear, the actual machines that changed how we experience time and space.
And honestly, by the end of this, you won't be able to look at your Focus Flow playlist the same way again. I promise.
Okay, let's rewind. We have to start at the germination point. The source material points us to the 1970s. So set the scene for us. What does the musical landscape even look like in, say, 1974?
Loud. It sounds incredibly loud. I mean, this is the era of the rock god. You've got Led Zeppelin filling stadiums. You've got guitar solos that go on for like 20 minutes.
Big hair, tight pants, the whole deal.
The whole deal. And the music is demanding your attention. It's grabbing you by the lapels and screaming, "Look at me."
And then quietly in the corner, you have this anti-rock movement kind of bubbling up.
Precisely. You have a few people, and most notably Brian Eno, who start asking a completely different question. They asked, what if music wasn't the center of the room? What if music was just the tint on the windows?
And that's where the term ambient is effectively born.
Brian Eno, Ambient 1. Music for Airports, 1978. That's the holy grail. He literally defines the genre right there on the liner notes. He wanted music that could be ignorable as well as interesting.
Which is such a weird concept.
It is, but the source points out that the vibe actually started a bit earlier, with albums like Another Green World or Tangerine Dream's Phaedra. The goal wasn't verse, chorus, verse. The goal was to extend space.
Okay, but let's talk about the hardware. Because today, any kid with a laptop can make a drone sound in 10 seconds. In 1975, you couldn't just, download a plugin.
No. Oh, no, you had to physically build the sound.
Yeah.
The heavy hitters mentioned in the article are things like the Moog Modular and the EMS Synthi AKS.
For anyone listening who isn't a total gearhead, what does a Moog Modular actually look like?
Imagine an old telephone switchboard from a black and white movie mixed with a sci-fi spaceship cockpit from, like, the original Star Trek.
Okay, I can picture that.
It's this massive wall of knobs and jacks. And to make a sound connect to an effect, like to add an echo, you physically had to plug a cable from point A to point B. It was architectural. You were literally building the sound with wires. And it was heavy.
And the source highlights the Revox A77 tape machine as the real MVP here.
Which brings us to the tape loop. I hear that term a lot. But how does it actually work in a pre-digital world?
This is the coolest part. Take Brian Eno's discrete music. So he sets up this system with 2 tape machines.
2 of them.
2. Machine A records the sound. Then the tape itself physically travels across the room to machine B, which plays it back a few seconds later. And then that sound is fed back into machine A.
So it's a delay. It's an echo.
It's a delay, but it's a degrading one. Every single time the sound loses, the physical tape loses a little bit of quality. It gets wobblier. It gets fuzzier.
Oh, interesting. It's a physical manipulation of time. The machine is essentially forgetting the music, very slowly. It creates this lush, decaying texture that a computer has a really hard time replicating perfectly because it's based on physical friction.
That's almost poetic. It's so different from just perfect digital repetition.
Exactly. And then you have Tangerine Dream using sequencers on Phaedra. A sequencer back then wasn't software. It was a hardware box that sent a voltage pulse to a synthesizer to tell it to play a note. Bum, 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 bum.
Right.
It created this mechanical, hypnotic pulse that humans couldn't possibly play that perfectly.
So the 70s gives us this germination, the idea that music can be a physical landscape manipulated by tape and by voltage.
Yeah.
Then we hit the 1980s, and the vibe shifts drastically.
That's a hard pivot. The 70s were warm, they were fuzzy, all that tape saturated. The 80s, cold, industrial, urban.
And the source links this directly to the geopolitical climate. We're talking about the height of the Cold War, nuclear anxiety, the rise of these concrete megacities.
And the gear reflects that perfectly. We move from analog to digital. The source highlights the Yamaha DX7.
Ah, the defining sound of the 80s.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you hear a sparkly, glassy, electric piano ballad from the 80s, that's almost certainly a DX7. It uses something called FM synthesis, which is very math-based. It sounds icy.
It doesn't have that warm hum.
Not at all. It has a crystalline, sharp edge to it.
We also see the Eventide H910 mentioned. What is that?
It's a harmonizer.
Yes.
It's a rack unit that could mess with the pitch of a sound digitally. It added these weird, almost glitchy textures. It took the warmth out and put the weird in.
So you could change the pitch of a drum or a voice.
In real time, yeah. Creating these unnatural, almost robotic artifacts.
There are a few albums mentioned here, Harold Budd and Eno doing the Pearl, which is beautiful piano work. But there's one specific album that the source flags as the absolute seed for everything that comes later.
Yes.
Talk Talk, Spirit of Eden from 1988.
This record is. It's a tragedy and a miracle. You have to understand, Talk Talk was a synth pop band. They had massive hits like It's My Life. They were on MTV. They had a budget.
A huge budget.
A huge budget. But for Spirit of Eden, they locked themselves in a dark studio in London for months on end.
No clocks, right. That's the legend.
No clocks, no windows. They projected oil patterns on the walls, and they recorded hours and hours of improvisation and then just cut it all up and threw most of it away.
Why is this album so important for the history of post-rock specifically?
Because they used silence as an instrument. In the 80s, pop music was just cluttered. It was wall-to-wall sound. Spirit of Eden is full of these gaps. A guitar note hits and then nothing for 3 seconds. It wasn't ambient because it had drums and vocals, but it wasn't rock either. It was the seed of post-rock. It demanded patience from the listener.
Which then blooms fully in the 1990s. The source calls this the explosion.
Yeah, the 90s are a weird, fascinating time. Grunge happens, so rock gets gritty again, but there's this massive experimental indie scene just bubbling under the surface. This is where post-rock finally gets its name.
How does the source define post-rock in the 90s? Because people argue about this label all the time.
The definition here is really practical. Using rock instruments for non-rock purposes.
Okay.
So you have a guitar, a bass, a drum kit, but you aren't playing riffs. You're not playing the blues. You're creating texture. You're creating timbre.
And the dynamics.
Oh, the dynamics are huge. It's the whole loud, quiet, loud thing taken to an absolute extreme, like a whisper turning into a jet engine.
The definition disc listed for this is Tortoise's Millions Now Living Will Never Die from 96.
Right. Yeah, they blended jazz, dub, electronics. They used the studio itself like an instrument.
Yeah.
But if you want the emotional heavy hitter, the source points Godspeed You, Black Emperor's F-Shag, A-Shag Infinity.
Oh, that album. It just sounds like the end of the world.
It does. The source calls it desolate urban music. And it just captures that pre-millennium tension perfectly. It opens with a monologue about the city falling into the ocean. It's bleak, but it's so beautiful.
And we can't skip Aphex Twin's Selected Ambient Works 8592.
The monument of ambient techno. That showed you could make this music with a beat, but a beat that felt like it was coming from underwater, or maybe from a broken machine.
Now we have to talk about the gear. Because there is one specific pedal mentioned in the source that I think every guitarist listening just visualized immediately. The green one.
The Line 6 DL4, the delay modeler. That ugly green brick changed the world.
Why was that one pedal so important?
Well, before the DL4, looping was hard. You needed those big tape machines we talked about or really expensive rack gear. The DL4 put looping at your feet.
Right.
You could play a guitar line, stomp on the pedal, loop it, play over it, reverse it, slow it down to half speed all live.
It turned a single guitarist into a one-person orchestra.
It completely democratized texture. Suddenly, every indie band in 1999 could make these washing oceanic soundscapes. You didn't need a producer. You just needed 4 AA batteries and a guitar cable.
We also see the Akai MPC 2000 mentioned for the 90s.
Right, which is usually associated with hip-hop. But bands like Tortoise used it to trigger samples. It meant post-rock wasn't just, guys with guitars. It became rhythmic, sample-based, collage-like. It really blurred the lines between genres.
So the 90s is this big explosion, then comes the 2000s, and the genre goes, well, it goes Hollywood.
Yeah, cinematic expansion.
Yep.
This is when your mom starts hearing post-rock in car commercials and she doesn't even know it.
It's the crescendo core era.
That's the term. The source calls it the intersection with post-classical.
Yeah.
And the biggest band here is obviously Sigur from Iceland.
A Gettysburgian. Even if you can't pronounce it, you know that sound.
You know that sound. That album was just huge. Bowed guitars, falsetto vocals, massive reverb. It didn't sound like a band in a garage. It sounded like a band on top of a mountain. It was mythical.
And explosions in the sky with the earth is not a cold, dead place.
The blueprint. If you've ever seen the show Friday Night Lights, you know this sound.
Totally.
Clean, delayed guitars that just swell into these massive, triumphant climaxes. It's incredibly emotional. It creates a narrative arc without a single word.
But the technology shift in the 2000s isn't about a single pedal. It's about the computer itself.
It's the DAW, the digital audio workstation. Pro Tools, Cubase, Logic.
Explain the impact of the DAW on this specific genre.
Well, in the 90s, recording still meant paying for studio time. You had a limited number of tracks. In the 2000s, you could record unlimited tracks in your bedroom. You could layer 50 guitars if you wanted to. The scale of the music got so much bigger because the barrier to entry just collapsed.
The source also highlights software samplers like Native Instruments Contact,
which allowed a guy in his basement to play a full-string orchestra on a keyboard. This is where the line between band and composer gets really blurry. Max Richter's The Blue Notebooks is a great example mentioned. It blends real classical strings with ambient electronics seamlessly.
And for live performance?
The Boss RC20 loop station. The red pedal. It took what the Green Line 6 pedal did and just put it on steroids. You could layer infinite loops.
Right.
This birthed the solo looping artist archetype, that one person standing alone on stage building a whole symphony from scratch.
Okay, so we've got massive crescendos, digital orchestras, then the 2010s arrive, and things get dusty.
The pendulum swings way back. The 2000s were very clean, very digital, very HD. The 2010s introduced the aesthetic of digital decay.
And the source links this to the rise of Spotify and the algorithm.
Yeah, we start seeing music designed for these immersive experiences. And weirdly, the rise of lo-fi.
Lo-fi beats to study to, the girl at the desk writing forever.
Exactly. But on the high art side of things, you have Tim Hecker's Versions from 2013. The source calls this digital decay and aesthetics.
What does digital decay sound like?
It sounds like a broken MP3 file. It sounds like a scratched CD skipping. Artists like Xenotrix Point Never, with the album replica, started taking samples of old 80s commercials and just stretching them out until they sounded like ghosts. It was hauntological.
It feels like a reaction to the perfection of the 2000s.
It absolutely was. We were surrounded by HD screens and perfect digital audio, so artists started fetishizing the glitches. They wanted the noise back.
And the gear followed suit. We see this massive return to hardware with Eurorack Modular.
We're back to the cables.
Full circle to the 70s.
Full circle, but on steroids. Eurorack is this format of small modular synthesizers you screw into a case. It became a huge phenomenon in the 2010s.
Why?
I think musicians just got tired of staring at laptop screens. They wanted to touch knobs again. They wanted that physical connection back.
But unlike the 70s moods, which were the size of a fridge, these are portable.
Portable, but infinitely complex. It allowed for generative patches, where the machine basically plays itself based on rules you set. You aren't playing the notes anymore. You're tending to the machine like it's a garden.
And the Zoom H4n recorder gets a mention.
The handheld field recorder. Suddenly, including the sound of rain or a subway train or a coffee shop became standard. It grounded all these electronic sounds in the real world. It added place to the space.
Which brings us to the 2020s, the present day. And the context here is, well, it's unavoidable, the pandemic.
Yeah, COVID-19 changed the trajectory of ambient music completely. We were all locked inside. We didn't need cinematic explosions. We didn't need more anxiety. We needed Xanax in sonic form.
We needed wellness.
The source identifies this big shift toward functional music. Music to calm you down, music to help you sleep, music for yoga.
The masterpiece mentioned here is Promises by Floating Points, Farrah Sanders, and the London Symphony Orchestra.
If you haven't heard this, pause this deep dive and go listen. It's unbelievable. It's jazz, it's classical, it's electronic, but it's so spacious. It's all about breath. It feels incredibly human, which is what we are all craving in lockdown.
But, and here's the twist, while the humans were making this organic breathing music, The machines were waking up.
The rise of AI. This is the new frontier.
The source lists AI composition tools like AIVA and Refusion.
And this is where we return to the concept of the loop, but the loop is finally broken. AI can generate infinite generative music. It can create a stream of ambient music that never repeats, ever, forever.
And spatial audio. Dolby Atmos.
Right. Music is no longer just stereo. It's not just left and right headphones. It's above you, behind you, below you. It's 3D. We are literally building sonic rooms now.
So let's try to synthesize this entire 50-year journey. We've gone from splicing tape with a razor blade to an AI algorithm generating 3D soundscapes. The source summarizes this as a shift from the materiality of sound to the environmental nature of sound. What does that actually mean?
In the 70s, sound was a material thing. It was a piece of tape, a voltage, a physical vibration. You manipulated the material. Now, sound is an environment. We're moving toward what the source calls immersive sound architecture.
Meaning the music isn't a song you play, it's a room you step into.
Exactly. It's a space.
Yeah.
And the prediction in the article is fascinating. It suggests the future is connecting generative AI with physical sensation.
Like biofeedback.
Yes. Imagine a sound architecture that reads your heart rate from your watch or your skin temperature. If you're feeling stressed, the AI smooths out the chord progression in real time. If you're sleepy, maybe it introduces a subtle rhythm to wake you up.
So it's a feedback loop between the listener and the generated environment. The music is listening to you.
Which totally changes the definition of art, doesn't it? It stops being media and starts being a utility or a companion.
It's a little dystopian, but also kind of magical.
It fulfills Brian Eno's original dream. He wanted music to be part of the environment, like the color of the light or the temperature of the room. We just finally have the technology to make that literal.
So, to you listening, next time you throw on that deep focus playlist, or you're watching a sci-fi movie and the soundtrack starts to swell, realize you aren't just blocking out your coworkers, you are participating in a 50-year experiment.
You're listening to the echoes of razor blades, the digital ice of the 80s, the green petals of the 90s, and the algorithms of today.
It's all one long, continuous loop.
It really is.
Here's a question to leave you with, though. If AI and spatial audio are creating these sound architectures that react to us individually, are we moving toward a future where we don't share music anymore?
That's a lonely thought.
Think about it. If your music is generated specifically for your neural state in real time, and my music is generated for mine, do we lose the shared experience of a song? Do we lose the concert? Or do we just gain a perfect personal soundtrack for our lives?
I guess we'll have to wait and hear.
Something to think about while you listen to the silence. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.